Hey everybody, welcome back to the Tackle Corner. Today's topic is spinnerbaits. This was viewer requested. I put a poll up this week and that was the winner. There were some other choices that were close, and so I'll probably do the second place topic next week or put up a new poll. I haven't decided quite yet what I want to do. So as far as spinnerbaits go, there are two main styles of spinnerbaits. Then I'll talk about a style of spinnerbait I like to throw that's a little less common. So in general, you're going to see two styles, and that's a spinnerbait with a Colorado blade, and then you'll see spinnerbaits with a willow leaf style blade. Now, my preference out of those two, I would prefer to throw a willow blade most of the time. I've not had as much success with the Colorado blade unless it's a combo where you have a big willow leaf and then a Colorado kicker. In general, a Colorado blade is going to go down deeper, and a lot of times when I'm fishing a spinnerbait, I'm not fishing very deep. I'm fishing shallow. So a willow blade, if out of those two. Now, a spinnerbait I like to throw a lot, which is sort of an in-between, is this one right here. You've probably heard me talk about it before on the channel, and that's Venom Lures turtleback spinnerbait. And this one it's a little different than a willow and a Colorado. If you can look at the blade, it's sort of like in between. I'll get one out that's not in the package, a little less glow, but you can see there that it's not as round as a Colorado, but it's not as long and thin as a willow leaf. And I kind of like that for a number of reasons, but the big one is that it's a little less common. And I've always been under the mindset, if you're throwing something a little different from everybody, that can be beneficial. Now, that's not always the case. Sometimes there's a reason nobody's throwing it, but this is sort of a unique lure, and that's why I like this one in particular. Now, when I go out, I always have two spinnerbaits rigged up after mid-April, and so I usually have one like this, and then I'll have a willow leaf, especially for the summer. Now, as far as big bass are concerned, the biggest bass I've ever came out of a kayak for me, or I caught it in a kayak, was a willow leaf, and it was this one in particular, actually. So it doesn't, like, people are gonna like what they like. I'm not saying willow leaves catch bigger fish than Colorados, but they are more popular on the whole. Now, when it comes to color, I think there's an important thing to talk about there, is that you're going to see spinnerbaits in all different kinds of colors. You're going to see red, black, white, green, black and blue. You might see chartreuse, silver. I mean, any number of colors. And what I'm going to say is you really only need three. First up, you're going to want something that's like a more natural pattern, something that's close to what a bait fish looks like. And that's sort of like a silvery, translucent kind of color. It might be called shad or ghost or something of that nature, a grayish color. Next up, I think it's important to have a white spinnerbait. Last year, the biggest fish I had on the line was on a white spinnerbait. It popped off, but that's always a great color, and especially in darker, cloudier conditions, white spinnerbait is great. And then if I had to pick a third, it would be another natural color. I like green a lot, or like a pumpkin seed type color. This one in particular from Venom Lures is called a bluegill. It's my personal favorite color. I've caught a lot of fish on that color. And I think those three colors are all kind of natural, and it makes sense for a spinnerbait. The spinnerbait is trying to imitate bait fish, or a school of small bait fish. And so you want something that's going to be similar to the color of what typical fish are. Now, I've had plenty of success on red spinnerbaits, but typically only for pike. I've not thrown red spinnerbait much for bass. And as far as other colors go, black is another color people like to use. I've not had a lot of personal success on it, but it is a popular color to throw. Once again, I've had success with pike, but not necessarily bass. A couple other colors you might see are chartreuse. That's one of my all-time favorite colors for pike. Fishing in stained tannic water, it really stands out. But I had to pick just two. It would be a tie between silver and then green. Those two colors. I could put all the other ones away and I'd probably be fine. one for a little more cloudy water, and then one for like clear water. For the clear water, I really like throwing the gray or the natural color. For dirty water, I like throwing the green or the white. And that's most of the time I'm only really using those three colors. And a lot of times I actually don't fish spinnerbaits very much in like muddy water. I fish spinnerbaits in murky water. So that's why I'm not usually using the more gaudy colors. If you have water that's a lot darker, white, red, and black, those are going to be probably the ones you're throwing more of the time. And now another thing to talk about is trailers. I myself, when it comes to spinnerbaits, I really prefer a paddle tail style swim bait on the back end. Now, there are, I mean, to be perfectly honest, hundreds of brands out there. One thing I like about it being consistent when you're using a spinnerbait is using that branded lure's soft plastic if they have it, because a lot of their colors will match. So this right here is the bluegill color from Venom lures, their donkey snatcher. It's going to go well with the spinnerbait I have from them. Now, if I had a spinnerbait from a different brand, I would want to pick something that was that same color palette from another brand. So if you're using like a Berkeley spinnerbait, they got lots of different spinnerbaits and lots of different colors. For a trailer, I mean, you have Kitech, you have Strike King, I mean, you name it, everybody makes this style of soft plastic. So it's more about matching that color to make it look really nice. Sometimes people like to mix and match colors. That can be effective too. One of my favorite colors to throw as a trailer, I actually throw this a lot of times on a gray or white spinnerbait, is this one. It's almost like a bluish gray trailer. I like this one a lot. It's called Natural Shad. So like I said, minnowy colors are always going to be good for bass, as long as you're not fishing in chocolate milk. Like bass only see really a few colors well, and those ones are always going to be well. And a lot of times the spinnerbait, the color is secondary. The biggest thing about spinnerbaits are the blades, right? So that's what's getting the attention of the bass more times than not. The sight, the brightness, the flash, as well as the commotion that spinnerbait makes in the water. It's very easy for them to pick up. They're going to feel it if they're close enough, and they're going to see it pretty well because it's going to be shiny and flashing, and in the corner of their eye, it's going to look like something that they normally, a bait fish. And that's why I like it so much. Now, last things to know, what am I throwing it on? When I go out, like I said, I take out 2 spinnerbait rigs every time in the summer and fall and late spring. And most of the time I have a heavier setup where I'm going to throw a slightly bigger spinnerbait, and then a slightly lighter setup where I'm throwing the willow leaf. The willow leaf doesn't have as much resistance as it goes in the water as like a Colorado or the turtle blade that I was talking about, which is kind of like an Indiana blade. So that's what I throw on my heavier setup. And on my lighter setup, I'm throwing the willow leaf. And typically I'm using the same reel. I'm using the 7-gear ratio reel so that I can slow it down if I want or burn it in shallow water. And then I'm using 15 or 17 pound fluorocarbon. I have found this kind of sweet spot. I've tried heavier and lighter lines. But for me, the 15 or 17 pound has been the best. I like Pline a lot. This one in particular is one I've not tried yet. I'm really excited to do is Halo. I've used their tactical fluorocarbon previously, and I really liked it, but I used too light of a line. So that was the only downfall of it. So I think that using this heavier line is going to be way better for throwing a spinnerbait. For a long time, I'd only used light line, so I didn't really know what to start with for spinnerbait line when I was trying out different kinds of fluorocarbon. But now that I'm pro staff for P-Line, I'm glad to go up to some of their heavier stuff. Because as I've talked about before, I've tried so many different brands. And it came down to the point where, because I was having not a lot of backlashes, but when I would get one, it was a bad one, I was switching to a cheaper fluorocarbon just simply because I was like, well, if I'm going to ruin a $30 spool, I don't want to waste that all the time. So that's why I've thrown a lot of different ones. But after filling out the stuff I did for P-Line, I was able to join their pro staff. So I'm excited to use their stuff because of the different brands I've tried, I've really liked the quality of their fluorocarbon, and it's really supple. Every fluorocarbon is different, and there's really no best fluorocarbon in every category. So you got to try them out to find out which one you like. There's fluorocarbons that are just downright bad. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to say particular brands, but there's some that just stink. And there are others that are really, really good all around, but they're probably going to break your bank or be the higher end of expenses. So not every fluorocarbon is the same. I've tried several. There's some popular brands I don't like at all that plenty of people use. And then there's some less popular brands that I thought were all right. And I enjoyed using, and they were a little cheaper. But what makes good fluorocarbon in general is going to be how little it stretches, how if the fish can see it, which they shouldn't be able to see it at all, and then its castability. And I think the stuff I have is a good combination of those things. You don't want something that's too supple, you don't want something that's too brittle, and you just got to find out what you like for your style of fishing. So give a few a shot and try them out. Now, one last note on spinnerbaits. I would say the last thing when it comes to, I talked about line, I talked about reel. Rod, super important. Now I throw it on two different styles here. You're going to get lots of different opinions when it comes to what rod do you use for a spinnerbait. I've used them all. I've used medium action. I've used medium heavy action. I've used heavy action. And honestly, it comes more down to not whether it's fast, or no, it does come down to that, my bad. It doesn't come down to the medium, heavy, because I use one that's a heavy and one that's a medium heavy. To me, it's more about where it's fast, moderate fast, or moderate. The moderate fast rod is the one I go to every time. I have one that's a heavy, moderate fast, and one that's a medium heavy, moderate fast. And when you're using fluorocarbon, that little stretch it has in the line, it doesn't have as much stretch as mono. And it's not like braid that has no stretch. When you go to set that hook, you can let them eat the lure a little longer before you snap it back on them. And I've really liked that with the spinnerbait. And I lost very few fish because I was able to get such good hook sets and keep them pinned with that style of rod. With a fast action rod, a lot of times you can actually miss bites. With braid, you can miss bites as well because you can feel everything, but that fish is going to feel that resistance a little quicker, and that can be tougher. And then mono stretches a little too much. I used to use mono all the time for spinnerbaits, but I lost a lot of fish with that. Now I really only use mono for some finesse spinning setups, and of course I use it for crankbaits as well. But that's pretty much it for spinnerbaits. Thanks for tuning in, of course. And next time, I think I'll do a special on the best 3 bass rods. I think was the second closest vote on my poll, unless that changes over the next couple days. If more people end up voting on it, I'll do something different. But I think that's going to be my next topic is. I don't know if I'll post another full-length video next Friday. We'll see what my schedule is. But tomorrow, I'm going to be doing a show at Fin Feather. I call it Triple F. Fur, Fin, and Feather in Rossford, or it's Fin Feather Fur. I always get it mixed up. It's a hunting and fishing store that's in Ohio. It's a really cool place. It's one of our sponsors for the Tackle Tournament Series and the sponsor for the podcast we're doing. And you've already seen the first episode if you follow my channel. That second episode is going to be on another channel. I will make a post linking it on my account, and it's going to talk about my favorite lures along with my friend Michael and Kevin, who also are part of the tournament trail. Michael is the main director, and I am another one. I'm more of like the judge and moderator, but I help a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff. He's the TD, the tournament director, and then I'm like the go-to on all the other kind of stuff that we do with it, so particularly for events. So if you are in the Toledo area, Northern Ohio, Southeast Michigan, and you want to get into kayak fishing, want to get into tournaments, we are a great league to get started on. We're paddle only. So if you're worried about budget, you can come fish in a $600 kayak and still have a shot at winning some money, having a good time. We have plenty of guys that this is the first ever competition they did was last year, and we got a lot of more people interested. So look up Tackle on Facebook, and we'll provide a link to that in the episode for our next podcast. So thanks for tuning in, everybody.